All right, so have you ever heard of the Bell Witch?
Oh yeah, the Bell Witch.
Yeah, we're going to do a deep dive into the Bell Witch. It's one of those classic American haunting stories that it kind of just gets under your skin a little bit,
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about the Bell Witch is it's this really unique blend of documented history and folklore.
right?
Yeah, I mean we have like early accounts, we have newspaper articles, and even a whole book dedicated to this haunting.
Right,
So
right.
there's all this like there's this paper trail.
Well, let's talk about that book. That book was written by Martin V. Ingram. Is that right?
Yeah, Martin V. Ingram in 1894
Okay, okay, all right.
wrote an authenticated history of the Bell Witch.
And so that's probably a good place to start. Like what is the core
Yeah,
of that story?
yeah, absolutely. So Ingram's book really paints this really vivid picture of the Bell family in 19th century Tennessee.
Okay.
So you have John Bell Sr., his wife Lucy, their children, and of course their youngest daughter Betsy,
Mhm.
all just kind of living their lives. And then things take a very dark turn.
And so, what are some of the details from the early accounts? Because it's not just like, the house is creaking or
Right.
it goes beyond that,
Okay,
right?
for sure. So Ingram describes, the haunting starting out with strange animal sightings, just kind of creepy things in the woods, and then it escalates from there. Knocking sounds, objects moving on their own, and then it gets really, really creepy. We're talking physical attacks on Betsy Bell.
Yeah. How specific do those accounts get about the physical attacks?
Well, I mean, we're talking like slapping, pinching, being stuck with pins
Wow.
by an unseen force.
Okay, so it's like assault.
Yeah, I mean, imagine being like slapped by a ghost.
Yeah, wow.
Like that's really intense.
And so is there a voice?
Oh, yeah. So the accounts describe this voice, this entity, that would often refer to itself as Kate.
Hmm.
And this voice was able to hold conversations. It could sing. It could quote scripture. But then it also seemed to have like this really wicked sense of humor.
Hmm. So it's menacing but mischievous.
Exactly.
Like you're afraid of it, but you're also like kind of
Kind of intrigued.
intrigued by it.
And then things escalate even further when John Bell Sr. is poisoned.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's a pivotal moment in the story,
It
right?
is.
Because now it's gone from harassment to
Murder.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So how does that play into the legend?
Well, even after John Bell Sr.'s death, the witch, would not let up.
Hmm.
Like, at the funeral, the witch was singing drinking songs.
Wow.
So, I mean, it really gives you this sense that it's like this entity was reveling in the chaos that it was creating.
Right, right. So one of the big questions with this is who or what is the Bell Witch?
Right.
And why the Bell family?
That's the million-dollar question. And Ingram's book actually presents us with a few different theories. One of those theories is that this is the disturbed Native American spirit that was maybe connected to a burial ground on the Bell property. And there's even a story about the witch sending some of the men on this wild goose chase to find buried treasure.
Oh, so like she was playing with them,
Exactly.
adding insult to injury.
Right. And then another theory is that this witch is actually the vengeful spirit of someone that John Bell Sr. had wronged.
Okay.
And there's actually a Mississippi variation of this legend where the witch is linked to a murdered overseer.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, talk about holding a grudge.
Right. So it's either something that's tied to the land itself or a personal vendetta against John Bell.
Mm.
But there's also this idea that it's not just a single restless spirit, that maybe it's something bigger than that.
Right. So there's also this kind of like symbolic interpretation that sees the Bell Witch as this manifestation of social anxieties of the time, particularly about slavery and displacement.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how, folklore often kind of reflects the deeper fears of a society.
That's a good point. It's like what people are afraid to really his name, it just kind of manifests itself in
Yeah,
this in
yeah.
this in this entity.
And if you actually kind of like examine some of the witch's actions, you might be able to find some hints about what her motivations were. For instance, she claimed to be old Kate Batts' witch.
Hmm.
But we don't really know who Kate Batts was. Like there's no historical figure that we've been able to identify that matches that description.
Hmm.
She also seemed to really dislike Bessie Bell's fiance, Joshua Gardner.
Oh.
And she also seemed to have this strange fondness for Lucy Bell. And she treated John Bell Jr. with a certain level of respect.
So it's like she's inserting herself into this family
Yeah.
dynamic and playing,
Yeah, like creating chaos.
yeah, and
Yeah,
manipulating it from the inside out.
exactly.
Before Ingram's book, were there any other early written accounts that mentioned the Bell Witch?
Yeah, there were a couple.
Hmm.
One of them was a journal entry by this military officer named John R. Bell. He
Yeah.
was on an expedition. And he heard rumors of this young woman who was always accompanied by a voice.
Okay.
So even before Ingram's book, we know that this story was kind of out there circulating, capturing people's attention.
So it wasn't just Ingram who put this on the map. People were talking about this already.
Yeah. There was also an article in the Saturday Evening Post
Okay.
that suggested that maybe Betsy Bell was a ventriloquist
Ah.
and that she was using these skills to create this illusion of the witch.
So even back then, there were those who tried to debunk it
Oh, of course.
and find a rational explanation for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ingram actually addressed that in his book.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that the Saturday Evening Post had actually retracted that article
Yeah.
and apologized for making the accusations against Betsy.
So that adds another layer of intrigue to it.
Right.
Right. Like everybody's trying to debunk it, but it just keeps coming back.
Exactly.
And then you've got Martin Fitz Ingram himself is a respected newspaper editor,
Right.
known for his integrity and his straightforward reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to put his name on this,
Right.
that's got to make people stand
Yeah.
up and take notice. And then you have Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States, has a
Right.
run-in with the Bell Witch.
Oh, yeah. So this story, the story goes that Jackson, he was intrigued by all the tales of the Bell Witch.
Right.
So he decided to investigate this haunting for himself, and he brought all of his men with him.
Okay.
And as they're approaching the Bell farm, the wagon suddenly stopped.
Old Hickory himself couldn't resist the allure of the Bell Witch.
Nope.
So what happens next?
Well, according to the story, Jackson exclaimed, "By the eternal boys, it is the witch."
Oh, wow.
And then this metallic voice rings out and says, "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight."
So, okay, now that's...
It's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, that's like straight out of a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
You can hear like the spooky music swelling
Yeah.
in the background. So did he actually meet with the witch that night?
So the legend gets even wilder. Jackson brought along a self-proclaimed witch slayer,
Oh.
someone who boasted about being able to banish spirits. And as you might imagine, the Bell Witch was not impressed.
So how did this witch slayer fare against the Bell Witch?
Not well.
Okay.
The Bell Witch basically taunted him. She rendered his gun useless, and she even let him out of the house by his nose.
Let him out of the house by his nose.
By his nose.
That's hilarious.
It's pretty funny.
It's like she knew exactly how to play with people's expectations and fears.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now historians haven't found any evidence to support that Jackson actually visited the Bell Farm.
Right.
But it's still a great story.
Yeah.
And it adds to the
How-
allure of the legend.
Yeah, it really shows how this story really captured the imaginations of, even the most prominent figures of the time.
Yeah. It's like those campfire stories that get passed down through generations and they get bigger and more fantastical
Yeah.
with each telling.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of what makes them so captivating.
Absolutely.
Now, the Bell Witch didn't just disappear after the 19th century.
No.
How did this legend evolve as we move into the 20th century?
So the 20th century saw the legend kind of continue to evolve. It was fueled by family stories, these kind of intriguing encounters, and of course this mysterious cave
Right.
that was on the property.
Now, one of the key figures from this era is Charles Bailey Bell, who is the grandson of John Bell Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He published his own book about the Bell Witch in 1934.
He did.
Did he offer any new insights into the story or shed light on any of the mysteries surrounding the witch's identity?
Well, so Charles Bailey Bell's book, he shared a lot of stories that had been passed down through his family. And a lot of them were about these prophecies that the witch had supposedly made. And these weren't just, everyday prophecies. We're talking about things like the Civil War,
Wow.
World War I.
Okay.
And she even foretold her own return in 1935.
Prophecies about major historical events. That's next level.
It is.
Did she actually make a comeback in 1935?
Well, there were reports of some strange happenings around that time. People reported hearing strange noises coming from the Bell Witch cave, objects moving on their own. People even heard faint music coming from a piano.
Like she was trying to make her presence known?
Yeah, it's almost as if she was trying to kind of stir things up a little bit.
Like a game of hide and seek with the world,
Hmm.
and leaving little clues to keep the legend alive. But were there any direct encounters with the witch during this time?
Oh, yeah. So we have a really, really chilling account from a journalist, David Gerard, and a photographer, Bill Wilson. They were granted permission to spend the night in the Bell Witch Cave in 1986.
Spend the night in the Bell Witch Cave.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be brave enough to do that.
So they were in the first cave room, and they started hearing all of these really unsettling sounds coming from, like, deeper within the cave. Groans, thumps, and even like a rumble that sounded like an earthquake.
Oh, that would be terrifying, just surrounded by those sounds in pitch blackness.
And then as they're about to leave, they hear the most terrifying sound of all. This high-pitched scream that echoed throughout the cave.
That would have sent me running for the hills. But it's fascinating that people are still drawn to this cave,
They are.
even knowing the history and the chilling tales that are associated with it.
It's almost like it's this magnet for people who want to, like, experience the unknown, test their courage, see if they can encounter something beyond our understanding.
Yeah, it's the thrill of the chase, the
Exactly.
possibility of experiencing something truly extraordinary. Now, amidst all these, spooky tales and these terrifying encounters, there are some lighter stories as well, right?
Right. Not all encounters with the Bell Witch were terrifying. So there's actually this really humorous story about a man named H.C. Sanders who ran out of gas near the Red River, like across from the Bell Witch Cave.
Okay.
And as he's walking toward town, this rabbit starts following him.
A rabbit? That doesn't sound too scary.
So he walks faster, then he starts running, but the rabbit keeps pace.
Okay.
So finally Sanders just sits down on a log to catch his breath.
All right, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happens next? Does the rabbit, turn into a monstrous beast or something?
Not quite. So the rabbit hops up on the log beside him, looks at him and says, "Hell of a race we had there, wasn't it?"
Wait a minute, the rabbit talked.
The rabbit talked.
Wow. So she's got a mischievous side as well.
Yeah. I mean, she clearly enjoys a good prank as much as a good scare. It really makes you wonder if she's not entirely malevolent. Maybe she's just this powerful entity with a very complex personality.
It adds another layer to her character.
Definitely.
Hmm.
And I think it's those lighter stories, alongside the chilling ones, that really keep this legend alive. Because it makes her seem more relatable, more human in this weird kind of way.
It's the blend of the terrifying and the humorous, the mysterious and the familiar that keeps us captivated, I think. But it's also important to remember that not everyone believes these stories, right? There are those who approach the Bell Witch legend with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. We can't ignore the rational explanations that have been put forth over the years. Researchers like Ben Radford, Brian Dunning, they question the validity of the accounts. They point to inconsistencies, embellishments, the lack of concrete evidence.
Right. Like any good mystery, there's multiple sides to the story. And it's up to each individual to decide how much they're willing to believe. What are some of the arguments put forth by these skeptics?
Well, a lot of them point out that, a lot of what we know comes from Ingram's book,
Right.
which, as compelling as it is based on stories and hearsay rather than hard facts.
Right.
There's also the argument that maybe some of the events could be explained by, natural phenomena or even hoaxes.
Right. Like maybe there was some trickery involved,
Right.
especially given, the time period and the prevalence of superstitions back then.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be the first time that a goose story turned out to have a more earthly explanation.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Joe Nickel, another skeptic, suggests that maybe Betsy Bell herself was behind some of the pranks. Maybe she was playing into the superstitions of the time.
It makes you wonder, was she a victim,
Yeah.
a perpetrator, or a
Yeah.
little bit of both?
Right.
But even with these skeptical perspectives, the Bell Witch story continues to resonate.
It does.
And I think it speaks to something deeper within us.
Yeah.
Something that goes beyond a simple belief in ghosts.
I agree. Amy Fluker, who studied the Mississippi version of the legend, said that whether hauntings are real or not, what matters is that people believe they are. It gives us a window into their cultural anxieties, their superstitions, the ways that they make sense of the world around them.
It's like these stories become a way to process our fears,
Yeah.
to confront the unknown, and to explore the boundaries of what we believe is possible.
And the Bell Witch story, with its blend of history, folklore, classic ghost story elements, I mean, it really taps into that fascination.
Right.
It makes us question, like, what's real? What's
Yeah.
imagined? What might be lurking just beyond our perception.
I mean, we haven't even touched on all the, like, quirky little details
No,
from the
yes.
sources. Like,
Yeah.
the account of her interrupting a trial by mimicking a witness's Dutch grandmother.
Oh, right.
Or the time she supposedly sang drinking songs at John Bell Sr.'s funeral. Like,
Right.
it's just, there's just so much
Oh,
there.
and the witch ball.
Ah, the witch
The
ball.
witch ball, yeah. There was a slave named Dean who was frequently targeted by the witch.
Oh.
And he tried to protect himself by having his wife make this ball out of hair, which was a folk remedy.
Wait, a hairball?
Like a hairball, yeah.
Like what cats cough up?
Not quite like what cats cough up. It was more like a tightly woven ball of hair
Oh.
that was thought to have protective properties.
Okay.
But in this case, it seems to have kind of backfired and angered the witch even more.
So not only is this witch mischievous and manipulative, but she's also got a flair for the dramatic.
She does. It's like she's the ultimate reality show villain,
Yeah.
always stirring up trouble.
Keeping everyone on their toes.
Yeah,
You never know what she's going to do next.
exactly. And I think that unpredictability is part of what makes her so fascinating. You just never know what she'll do next, who she'll target, what form she'll take.
Yeah.
It's that element of surprise
Yeah.
and mystery that keeps us hooked.
She embodies the chaos and mystery of the unknown.
Yeah.
And she reminds us that there are still things in this world that we can't fully explain or control. And maybe that's okay. Maybe a little mystery is good for the soul.
I think so, yeah. It keeps us curious, it keeps us humble,
Yeah.
and it keeps us open to the possibility that there's more to life than what we can just see and touch.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Bell Witch legend, the question remains,
Yeah.
why do you think this story continues to resonate with people even after all these years? What is it about the Bell Witch that keeps us coming back for more?
I think it's because the Bell Witch offers us this really unique way to engage with the unknown, to explore our fears, explore our fascinations, and to connect with this like really long tradition of storytelling that really just taps into something primal within us.
It's a story that allows us to embrace the mystery, embrace the possibility,
Yeah,
and the thrill of a world where not everything can be explained away with logic and reason.
exactly. And who knows, maybe the next chapter in the Bell Witch saga is being written right now.
Hmm.
Maybe someone listening is having their own eerie encounter.
Ooh, that's a chilling thought.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's also exciting. You know, the Bell Witch reminds us that the world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And sometimes the most captivating stories are the ones that blur the lines between fact and fiction.
So the next time you find yourself near Adams, Tennessee, maybe take a detour to the Bell Witch Cave.
Yeah.
Listen closely. You might just hear a whisper, a groan,
Or a mischievous laugh.
or a mischievous laugh echoing through the darkness.
Who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to write the next chapter.
Right?
This captivating tale.
Just remember, if you do encounter the Bell Witch, be respectful.
Yeah.
You never know what she might do next.
Wise words. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that flashlight handy. You never know what you might find lurking in the shadows.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the Bell Witch. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the heart of a truly fascinating American legend.